I think we're about to start our webinar, which is using and operating the hosted RPKI.
Recording in progress.
I see the number of attendees is still going up, but we'll warm up with a short introduction so people can still join and enjoy this webinar. So good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. And I really appreciate it, maybe very early morning or very late evening for some of you. So thank you for joining today's session, where we'll focus on the topic of operating an RPKI infrastructure. As you may know, RPKI is a hierarchical structure that follows the address allocation scheme. The areas allocate address space to LIRs, and they in turn assign to their customers. Therefore, some of the branches can be delegated and operated by the entity that receives this address space. This is called a delegated RPKI. But by far, the most used type of RPKI service is a so-called hosted RPKI, when its management, including management of certificates and ROAs, which is route object authorizations, is outsourced to what we call an operator of RPKI services. Now, at the moment, there are five, these are the 5 areas that provide such service to their members. So they're mainly in focus, but in the future, there may be more. So today we'll be speaking mostly about this type of service. Before we jump into this, let me introduce our panelists today. So in no particular order, let me welcome Vamsidhar Raya from Google, Ali Manfared from Microsoft, Carlos Martinez from LACNIC, and Willy Manga from Afrenic. Thank you very much. And we can start our discussion. So before we jump into sort of the core of our discussion, I would like to ask a question. What are the challenges the network operators who want to deploy RPKI and use it? And I'm looking at Vamsidhar. Maybe you can share your experience in using RPKI and specifically using the hosted RPKI services.
Sure, Andrei. Hello, everyone. So I'm Vamsidhar. I work at Google. So I was involved in publishing using RPKI for Google resources across different areas. A little bit of context. So we basically have resources across all areas, all 5 of them. And then we created ROAs for across all areas. So speaking to my experience, so one of the first challenges we faced was lack of or incomplete API to automate ROA publication. So why do we choose automation? Because we have a lot of resources, and also there is a lot of churn in the resources every week. So creating them manually is error prone and also not sustainable. So we chose the automation route, but only 2 out of 5 RIRs have provided an API to automate ROA publication. Luckily, 80 to 90% of our resources lies in these 2 RIRs, so that worked out okay for us. Ideally, if all 5 RIRs can provide an API to publish, that would be great. So we also came to know that other RIRs are close to providing an API, so excited to see progress there. Coming to the incompleteness of API, so just to give an example, so when we started looking at an API for RIRs, the first thing we look at is RN. This is in 2019. So when we started, so there was no support for deletion of ROAs. Later it was added, but then there was a limit, and then the limit was like 4,000 or 1,400, I believe, was the limit, and then they increased to 20,000. So there was some time to mature this API. So it's great that Aaron improved that and then added these necessary features. So we had to start with a different design as a workaround for this, and then later we changed it. And then since Aaron started supporting the deletion, so that helped us in streamlining this Robo publication as well. So those were two main challenge. Those are the main challenge, and the second main challenge was the difference between the feature support across RIRs. So the two RIRs which support the automation, Arin and Ripe, have differences in the features. It may be auto renewal, provision of expiration dates, allowing duplicate ROAs, how to manage keys. So as more and more RIRs start supporting this automation, it might become a challenge to understand which feature set is supported by which RIR. And then taking these into account in the automation might become a challenge. So saying that, there are a lot of great things that these RIR support. For example, the test accounts that Aaron and Ripe provides were great. I mean, those were really useful in testing a Robo publication. So to identify the issues beforehand and also catching potential issues like resources which does not belong to certain org in RN or not allocated to us, things like that. So the two main issues: lack of incomplete API automation, and the difference between the feature set in this automation. So those two things.
Siddharth, thank you very much for this sharing of your experience. You have two questions, by the way, in the Q&A session. I can read it for you. So one question from Russell Bean, and he asks, given that Google has a worldwide CDN and often hosted with ISPs and using the IP range from the ISPs, do you deal with RPKI from third parties where you don't have control over the ROAS? Does Google have a plan to assist or motivate ISPs that don't use RPKI?
Yes, so we have a very small number of prefixes which we use from the ISPs, like our public DNS, the 8.8.8.8. So, and we have some resources in that space which we don't have control over. So we had to talk to the ISPs in that specific case. I believe it's CenturyLink, and then ask them to create ROAS for us. So we have very few cases, so we did not have to deal with a lot of ISPs. But yes, there is support needed from ISPs, and then so we are basically approaching case-by-case basis.
Okay, well, there is another question from Alex Bund, and he asks, it would seem Google having address space in 5 RIR regions would be a typical candidate to deploy delegate RPKI. Why didn't you choose to do that?
That's a good question. So we considered delegated RPKI. There are two main reasons. One is the hosted RPKI is the fastest route to create ROAS, and two, the software in the delegated RPKI space was not mature, or it's not available when we not available widely when we started looking at this. So we went the hosted route, and also the other factor is that, as I said, majority of our space is in 2 RIRs which already support automation, Aaron and Ripe. So we thought we could quickly publish a ROAS through the hosted RPKI route because these two support automation, and that's what we did.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, at the moment there are no more questions. I wonder, Ali, I know you're going to present some of the recommendations, the requirements, but if you have anything to share from your experience, from Microsoft experience, also dealing with hosted RPKI, and maybe addressing some of the questions that were asked to Vamsidar. Then please go ahead.
Sure. Good morning, noon, or afternoon, everybody, depending on your time zone. I am Ali from Microsoft, and me and Somesh, who might join the meeting sometime soon, are responsible for doing the work for RPKI on the Microsoft side. So I would use this time, as Andrei said, to just generally going over the kind of experiences that we had, and then we can come back about the requirements in the next sections of this webinar. So similarly to our friends in Google, we also have resources across all of the 5 RIRs with a concentration in especially ERIN, and then a good number in RIPE and APNIC, and then we also have some number in AFRINIC and some in LACNIC. And our experience, I guess, is kind of similar. So I think we also had the challenge of, in terms of dealing with management of ROAs across the 5 RIRs. So essentially, one issue was having access to kind of a unified way to automatically sign all of the APIs. So that was one kind of a challenge. And similarly, again, these APIs started to get evolved, and right now ARIN and RIPE have pretty good systems, though we would love to see them kind of more similar or more unified, because on our side it would also be nicer if we are dealing with kind of one language or one system rather than 5. The other thing that I can say is I think we also had issues in terms of kind of expiry and all those kind of things, and it may be because it was a new experience for us. So it's been a little bit over a year that we are doing the RPKI work, and I think it might be something that some other panelists who also own prefixes and spaces might share as well, that it is very critical for us to maintain these ROAs in a healthy state and not expired. And while we do understand that there is auto renewal in, I guess, most of the registries today, it was a lot of stress on our side to make sure that they will actually get auto renewed, and make sure how and when they are going to get auto renewed, or having more control if we want to make sure, for example, something is going to get auto renewed 1 year before, or a few months before, or 6 months before, or 1 month before, so on and so forth. So I guess that was one experience. We had I think one more experience that I can share, and I don't know, maybe once we get back to the presentation, we can go over that in more detail, was that also there was some interesting things that we were seeing in terms of, so one side of RPKI was, of course, signing our own resources, which is what I was mainly talking about. But the other side of this was also just looking at the RPKI and internet, and how others are signing their prefixes, and also essentially thinking about filtering or applying policies based on assessment of RPKI of routes that we receive. And I think one thing that we started to see was that in a lot of cases, and there is a lot of entities, a lot of companies, ISPs, providers, etc., that are signing their prefixes. So we saw a lot of inconsistencies in terms of the RPKI data that we're getting, in terms of how consistent is RPKI data versus the routing plane. So in a specific, I think one interesting observation that we were seeing was in a lot of cases, folks are, for example, they own a ROA somewhere, and then they change the ASN from ASN A to ASN B, but the route is still advertised with ASN A. So essentially, a lot of RPKI invalids what we got at, and we were looking at them and we were studying them, is not actually invalids. It's the result of mistakes in the way that networks are operating their routing plane versus the RPKI kind of plane. And this is, I don't know, it's just an observation, and we can talk about it more. But the reason that I want to bring it up is that there is one thing actually that can be done on the side of registries, which is essentially telling people that if by doing any change to their ROAS, would they invalidate their route or not? But the kind of idea, the overall idea and why this is something interesting or something that we are even bringing up is that the hope is that we want to make RPKI to be a kind of a ground truth for looking at the status of a prefix and ASN and make sure they are valid and invalid. And I think those of you who are more familiar with the general topic of BGP hijacks, this is a problem in BGP hijack detection as well, that most of the schemes, they detect a lot of hijacks, but then most of these hijacks are mistakes or things that are okay, or somebody is just having another entity from which they're announcing their route. So the problem of BGP hijack detection is not about detecting the hijacks, it's about detecting too many hijacks. And our hope is not that, is that RPKI does not go to that bucket. So our hope is that RPKI goes to the bucket of detecting bad things happening and things that we can completely trust and say, okay, if this is RPKI invalid, I have to definitely not look at it, not let it into my network. And it is not going to be the result of, at least with a very high confidence, it's not going to be the result of an mistake of an ISP or a provider. It's most probably either a malicious activity or something that should not have happened. If it is a mistake, it's a crash or something that is on their side causing it. So I should reject this as still. I think that was something that I can add to what Vamsi said. And then pretty much the rest of experiences and things were similar to them. So that's pretty much my take, I guess, on RPKI, and I'll give back the forum to you, Andrei.
Thank you, Ali. Well, I see a few hands raised, and I posted in the chat that in the interest of time, at this point, please type your questions in the Q&A, and we'll have a Q&A session later, sort of that ensure all questions are answered, and we will have an opportunity to raise hands at that time as well. But thank you very much, Ali. And I think that this experience led to the work that started in the Manus community, right? And specifically in CDN and cloud program, which led to the development of some recommendations that Ali, you're going to present, as I understand. So I'm giving the floor back to you. You can share your slides. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Sure. Give me 1 second to open the document. So just to give you guys, as I'm opening the document and preparing to share it, this that I'm gonna share in a few seconds is essentially a document that we were preparing regarding the status of RPKI and the kind of things that we were looking at. And essentially, it was a document that, as Andrei said, we started with looking at the kind of trying to get from the from different providers and all of the questions that we had, and then we ended up with these kind of things, and hopefully after I shared this, there would be a good discussion in terms of which of these makes sense and which of these doesn't, and so on and so forth. So hopefully I am let's see, I'm sharing from here. So let's close these. So because I think you should be able to see my document now, right?
Yes, we see your screen. Well, we see the document, in fact.
Great. So, okay. So let me go just very briefly over this whole document and what it represents. And I think I don't know, maybe we can share some format of this document with everybody so that we go over the things in it, and if you wanted to contribute or those kind of things. So first of all, I mean all of you are kind of familiar with RPKI on a high level, and I think Andrei talked about it. One thing that we are talking about here is we were talking about a concept of operators of RPKI services. So these the whole points and the whole items discussed in these documents are suggestions that we have from operators of RPKI services. And the reason that we use this specific jargon for operators of RPKI services essentially is that, so we think of the 5 main registries, adding APNIC, LACNIC, AFRINIC, and RIPE as the main operators of RPKI, but we also are in confession that there are other operators of RPKI. So if you look at it, for example, in our case, and I think some of our friends have the similar thing, we have a lot of prefixes in C and NIC that, although technically they are in APNIC for all of the practical purposes, we are working with C and NIC to manage these prefixes. And I know about Taiwan NIC. I think there is a bunch of these kind of hosted RPKIs that are not exactly the main 5 continental ones, and they're under somebody, but they still exist. So we wanted to kind of expand this to essentially say that this kind of the whole requests here and the whole discussions here is not limited to only the 5 main continental operators that I was talking about, but anybody who operates a good number of prefixes, and people have resources there to look at it. So somebody was asking me to not have the markups here. Sure, I can see where I can turn off the markups. I should have done that sooner, but or if you know, just type in the.
Yeah, there is a all markup, Ali. There is a drop down box, all markup, and you can choose no markup, or you see the drop down in the middle of your screen, all markup.
Okay.
Yeah, just choose this drop down box.
In the middle of my screen.
Yeah, it's in the middle of the menu.
Oh, here,
just
here.
up, go
sure,
up.
Sure,
yeah.
Got it, no more. Got it. Thank you. Sorry for the disturbance of that. Great. So continuing on that, so we were talking about this concept of the OSRs, and we were essentially thinking about the kind of things that we ask from them. So going into the kind of things that we were talking about, so we were trying to categorize everything here into different categories, and the first level of requests are what matters about the ROAs. And I think all of you are, I think, experts in the field of RPKI and definitely know about it much more than myself does. And you are familiar with ROA. So essentially, ROA is a route origin authorization. It's one record in the RPKI world that has all of this cryptographic information. And as we said, most of the things that we are doing here is what we are trying to say about the hosted RPKIs. I think it's good for everything that we are discussing here. That is, some of them could be applicable to delegated RPKI for folks who are publishing resources on behalf of somebody in a delegated manner. But that being said, I think that would be its own challenge, maybe something different, that regulating the delegated RPKI would be maybe a different topic or something that we can discuss later as well. So I think this part of the document just essentially discusses the sort of definitions of the RPKI and ROAs and what they are. But the sort of specific things that we are thinking about, I think one of them is about the auto renewal that I was talking about. So I think the first ask here is to have a kind of an auto renewal as an option for all of the resources that people have in the hosted RPKI, and the request is at least to be able to have auto renewal for all of the resources for everybody. Now we understand, as we were talking about this, and there was a lot of comments back and forth on this document, that the auto renewal might not be the thing that everybody wants to do or everybody chooses to do, but the consensus, at least on the previous forum that we're talking about it, was that folks were interested to have the auto renewal, and again with some completely known parameters. So the standard with, I think, in the world of certification is usually 90 days. So the suggestion is to have an auto renewal 90 days prior to the expiry, and then we can always provide the option of opting out of auto renewal if if and we have to always, with all of these suggestions, I guess, be mindful of the fact that the users of RPKI are probably way beyond everybody who is attending this webinar, or there's a lot of people who use RPKI. Pretty much every ASN is potentially a user of RPKI because they own some prefixes, and there is tens of thousands of them. So that being said, we were also suggesting that the auto renewal the opting out of auto renewal could be an option for anybody who chooses to do so. And feel free to, by the way, I guess, okay, I can see the questions, I think, here. Let me look at them. I think I can stop at every point that I have here and look at some of the questions. So I think I understand your concerns about expiry timing. We have seen organizations who use automation programmatically to add, delete, etc., to mismatch between the RIRs. Great. Thank you, Brad. I think, and feel free to add to this if I didn't get it. I think your point is right, and if I get it correctly, we can use automation, of course, to manage all of these. But then again, this is not a concern about our own organization per se. It's about generally whoever that is operating RPKI. And our kind of expectation is that a lot of people, even if everybody provides the API, a lot of people would either not invest on using these APIs or not have the kind of manpower to use the automation. So a lot of these ROAs would go expired, and then that can cause issues. And we also look into the other side of the story, by the way, that we shouldn't have an expiry of 10 years, for example, because by 10 years, that entity might have completely be gone or something like that. So we were looking at some sort of a sweet spot that things get auto-renewed on a schedule, but not for too long that the whole resource is gone. So it doesn't get essentially into the point that that things that the organization is still there, and just because they have forgotten, the auto-renewal goes away. And the second question is that Alex was telling, as far as I know, only adding you have explicitly renew your ROAs. So I think you're right in general, Alex. I have to review the kind of things that they had. But then again, this is, I think, few things. One is, and I get to the second point. One point is about the kind of standardization of, I think the second point would be a standardization of validity, but we also talk standardization of auto renewal. So we want the kind of behavior to be consistent among everybody and having exactly the same thing. So that is, I guess, one point of it. And then the second thing, as I said, there may be other entities that would come. Like I said, today we have CNNIC and TWNIC that I know of, and there may be others that I'm not mentioning, and they already exist. So the idea is to have this standard for everybody. And the last question from Tony, given that one of the big problems with IRR data is that they can get very stale, does auto renewal risk replicating this problem? I'm not sure that it does, but it's something to consider. Correct. That is, I guess, the reason that we were talking about 90 days auto renewal. And then also this should be tied into, I think, the resource registration and everything. So we are not suggesting by any means that if I do own a prefix in ARIN, and then if I deregister, or if I don't even maintain it, I think that maintenance for some of the IRRs relates to, I don't know, paying the membership fees or being a member of the organization or something like that. So the idea is to have it only 90 days before the expiry for the resources that are maintained. So if the resource is not maintained, I think you're right, and we are not suggesting to put them on a complete autopilot. Great. So that being said, and in the interest of time, I'll move to the second point, which is kind of very similar to the first point. So standard validity, we also essentially talk about the fact that when you sign the ROA, and I think I kind of mentioned that we are suggesting to have the similar consistent validity for these resources. So in our experience, we have had 1 year validity, we have had 2 year validity. In some of the IRRs, we even had the option of signing something for the next 10 years, which was, I don't know, good maybe for some organizations in the sense that you don't have to come back and and sign it again or worry about auto renewal or anything. But that being said, we believe that probably a standardization of this would be better. And the suggestion here, I think, is that at least 2 years of ROA validity. So when you sign something, it might be good to have that number. And then again, all of these, I think, as the forum gives feedback in terms of any of these points, we can change them. So it doesn't need to be 2 years if a lot of people disagree with that and want it to be 1 year or so on and so forth. And the third point in terms of the ROAs is about the alerting on the expiration or renewal. I think that can kind of also go to the previous question that was asked in terms of stale resources. So even if there is so first of all, for the people who are opting out of auto renewal, I think it would be good if there is a way to alert them. And the alert, I think, can be both an email alert, or eventually, as we talk about APIs, there can be also APIs that everybody can pull to just know the status of all of the resources that they have. So these are two ways that people can look at these alerting on the resources. And I think the alerting right now, in this point, the whole point of alerting is for the ROAs, but I think it might be a good point just generally, maybe out of this document, to have this alerting for membership or resources that people hold. But the idea is that we want people to know, even if their resources are getting auto-renewed, they know when it is getting auto-renewed and how it is getting auto-renewed. And especially, like I said, if somebody has opted out of auto-renewal, we want to make sure that they are reached out to make sure that they renew their resources. And I think the email alert is definitely very important here, because then again, as I said, as we talk about APIs, we don't expect everybody to be using APIs, both because of the size of the organizations and also because of the number of resources. So many of these entities, they may have 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 resources in the authority. So they probably would not be even interested to use the auto renewal. So that being said, and I don't see any question in the Q&A section, feel free to interrupt me, I guess, as I'm jumping from item to item, if you want to ask it over audio. But assuming that there is no questions, I go to the second point.
Don't worry, I monitor the questions, so I'll alert you if there are questions related to specific questions. So just go ahead.
Cool. Thank you very much, Andrei. Sure. So I'll jump into the second point now, which is about API and security management. So the general kind of space of these kind of asks is about, first of all, I think, as Vamsi was also bringing this concern, and I know this is a concern for a lot of other friends in the bigger organizations that we were talking about, automation is very important. So the kind of maybe standard CRUD kind of APIs is very important for everybody, and for everybody, at least for everybody that has a lot of resources. And I think the reasons, as our friends were also mentioning, is one, because a lot of organizations, the big organizations, they have a lot of resources, so it would be good for them to use it, and also a lot of changes. So in our case, for example, we own a number of ASNs and a number of prefixes. So it is pretty common that we move one resource from a specific ASN to another one, or we acquire a new IP space and we start announcing resources from there. So if we can use API to kind of programmatically sign these resources, or sometimes the signing is not only adding, so it's not always create, it's also update and delete. So we need to be careful of that as well. So like I said, sometimes we may migrate from one ASN to another ASN, so same prefix, just announcing it from a different ASN, or sometimes we have leased or are giving back some IP prefix or something, so we want to unsign it. So the point is to have this possible for all of these kind of scenarios. And that being said, so I think the first part of this thing is about being able to have the APIs for ROA management, which is kind of very important. And also, just as we talk about programmatically signing ROAs, I think we are kind of mentioning APIs and then something, probably a REST API or something of that flavor. And then again, the reason being is that we are trying to use something that pretty much everybody uses. It's I mean, it's always possible to also go for suggestions in terms of exposing maybe different libraries in different languages, so on and so forth. But the fear for those is that, let's say we say in Microsoft we use a lot of C# or Python or something like that, but we cannot generalize it to make sure that everybody else uses it. Hopefully APIs or REST APIs is something that most of the organizations, no matter what framework or what technological stack they use, they would be able to consume and use it. So that's why. And we started with giving some more specifications on these APIs, and this is still, I would say, work in progress in terms of giving more into this. But I think all of these APIs, and hopefully I think we have a point about API security which we are going to get at. So all of these APIs of course should be protected with some API key, which is the kind of obvious point here. But then at least the two APIs that we definitely want to have is, one of them is a get ROAs API, which would essentially gives all of the ROAs that this member has in its account. And hopefully the way that we were thinking about it is that it gives all of the resources across all of the IRRs, or you can do it per IRR as well. But at least for one IRR, it gives all of the resources. And then the idea is that to have the same response format for all of them, which is something that we were going back and forth on. So that would allow people to just have kind of a code that is agnostic, that no matter how they consume it, they can be agnostic to the IRR. And as I said, this is not about the 5 IRRs. If it is only about the 5 IRRs, we can still suggest people to use 5 different sets of APIs or something like that. But this is also about later on, as we have more hosted RPKI, more of these OSRs that we were talking about, and then also maybe things that can be done for delegated RPKIs if later on as we go over. So that's I guess one thing. And then also talking about adding or updating the ROAs. So I think that's the other thing. So we can add ROAs, we can withdraw them, and I think this format is kind of one of them that is representative of this. So that's I guess one part of it. And then also I guess removal of the ROAs, so you can have a specific ROAs that you want to remove from your member account. So that's another thing. Now the next point is about the API security. So this is also very important. So this API key that we were talking about, it is also very important to make sure that how this API key is generated. And the idea that we had was that, first of all, that it would be good that the access to this API key is time limited, probably. So it's not that somebody has an API key and it's going to work for forever or for eternity. And then also we can have different levels of access. So we can have admin access to perform all operations. We can have editor access for only the ROA management. We can have viewer only to be able to read. This would allow also to essentially give different levels of access, which would add to the security here. So in the interest of time, since we have more items to cover, I'll just jump into the third item, assuming that those asks were clear. So
Ali,
the third item.
Ali, just a second. I see Alex Bond has a hand. Alex, if it's a question, could you type it in, or is it just a quick reaction? Okay, well, I don't.
Maybe this wasn't all the
yeah,
question.
That wasn't.
Sometimes people...
just go ahead, but just in the interest of time, maybe you can cover in sort of a high level the main points of,
Sure.
of other recommendations. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So I'll go over these 2 points kind of very fast. So the first one is about the infrastructure health. So the whole idea is that a lot of items, and maybe I should have covered it when I was going over the observations that we had at Microsoft. So a lot of things happen, I think we have had, especially with the kind of newer OSRs that came into the space. We saw that we saw few events in terms of crashing in the platforms or things that happens on the side of the publisher that ended up to have a lot of instability in the RPKI space. So the general idea here is that we want the OSRs to have APIs both for people to be able to query the status of the health. So can I ask if the status, what is the status of the ARIN as a platform? Is everything healthy? Is the publication and everything on track or anything like that? And then also maybe alerts in terms of the degradation of the service. So if there is a maintenance going on in ARIN, if it is possible that the API calls are going to be rate limited because of something that is happening, or if there is any event that is happening, it would be good to send these notifications. Again, both could be in the sense of emails or some sort of a contact to the people, and the first point would be the API manner of doing that. And we suggested that at least for the API part of it, there can be a get service health API, which we can further talk about the response of it. But essentially the idea is just to make sure that the infrastructure of the places from where you are consuming the ROAS for filtering or for essentially doing some judgment on them is also healthy. So that being said, I think the last point is about these kind of observations that we talked about, that when people do some changes in terms of the ROAS, what happens. So this is also generally, so we were talking about what can happen when you change a ROA and it can impact some of the subnets. So sometimes people do a change, but the change is done on the change is done in a way that essentially some of their subnets would be affected, which is something that they forget to kind of consider. And then also there is ASN change validation, which also then again can happen, that when you have a prefix that you are announcing from ASN A and then you start to announcing from ASN B, and that is the case with a lot of organizations that they own multiple ASNs. This can invalidate some of the existing ROAS. And I think that the overall kind of recommendation here, which this one might be the hardest one for the OSRs to implement, but at least we want to put out the suggestion, is to essentially give people information from the routing plane that what would have happened if you do this change. So the kind of overall ask is that if we can have an what if kind of scenario, in the sense that what if I withdraw this ROA when I want to perform it? What if I do this update on the ROA? And maybe if it ends up in especially invalidating some of the resources, at least we can give them some sort of a warning that if you do this ASN change, then these routes are going to be invalid over the internet and possibly rejected, because a lot of people are doing filtering right now. And they can make a judgment and they can still press the button if they really want to move with that. So that being said, I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover. This table here is essentially, and I can bring it to the next page maybe, is what we were observing in terms of all of these asks with different OSRs up until now. That being said, I think that's pretty much on the ask. I want to use this 15 minutes for the folks to ask questions, or Andrei, I think you can take it back if there are other things on the agenda.
Ali, thank you very much. Yes, we have other things on the agenda, but we also have we'll have some time reserved for Q&A. Just to mention that this is work in progress, and it's an important thing. And what's also important, Ali, I would like to stress, you mentioned this, of course, is that we're striving for consistent experience, operational experience, when you deal with multiple operators of RPKI services. So consistency is very important. We are thinking, well, the idea is to, as far as I understand, is to publish this as a manners document, but it may benefit from soliciting a wider community feedback. We'll discuss and figure out how to open this document for comments and questions. We already captured good questions and comments from the chat, so we'll use them, but maybe we'll open this up for wider community feedback. And then with the idea to publish this as a manners document as a global reference point for different activities. Well, thank you very much, Ali. I would like to turn now to a slightly different topic. I would like to turn to some of the operators of RPKI services that are present on our panel, to Willie and Carlos, and ask them to share their experiences in operating those services, and maybe about the features and plans that they have in mind. Let me turn to Carlos first, and then Willie.
Thank you, Andrei. In the interest of time, I'll try to be rather quick. My name is Carlos. I work for LACNIC. I've been working on LACNIC for almost 11 years now. I was there when the first ROA was created by an organization in Argentina, actually. Which was quite an emotional moment. That first hosted system of ours was roughly based on RIPE's NCC code, and it has underwent several iterations by now. Now it's most RIPE code is gone. Now, operating the hosted RPKI has brought a good deal of learning for us. We identified quite early in the process that operators and people in general tend to understand their own networks in a less comprehensive way than they should, in my opinion. For example, we used to run these ROA parties in our events, and people usually didn't know which AES they were announcing their resources from. It sounds crazy, but it's true. And it happened several times. And when it came to decide which max length to use, they had no clue. So they ended up, everyone used 24, for example, for IPv4. In fact, up to this day, I believe that max length is probably one of the worst or most badly understood aspects of creating a ROA. This led us to create several tooling around RPKI in order to help people create the ROAs. For example, we created a very simple tool where people would enter their LACNIC membership information, basically what we call the handle, and the system will pull from the database the resources and compare it to RIPE's RIS routing information, and basically tell them, this is what I think your ROA should look like based on current routing table information. Provided that you are confident with this, click here and the ROA will be created. And that was basically made a difference into how much RPKI was deployed in the region. It was very successful. On the other hand, I believe that our region has a lot of false invalids, if you will, and probably that's due to the, I would say, not very prudent use of the tool for by some operators. But I will get to that later. Now, I very much welcome this involvement from large operators, basically Google and Microsoft. This is, I would say, a piece of feedback that we were missing in our region. And in fact, regarding our API for ROA creation in the hosted system, we actually was kind of a surprise for us that large operators like Google and Microsoft would actually prefer the hosted version to the delegated version. And we were, I would say, for us being a small team, we were caught a bit off guard because we put a lot of effort into implementing and getting up-down out the door. And we actually prioritized that over providing an API for hosted. Now we see that's the good part of getting feedback, that there is actually room for an API for hosted. Actually, our API for hosted it's actually ready. It's not in production yet, but it will very, very shortly. And it looks very much, it's not exactly the same, but it looks very much to what Ali just showed in his document. So where do we go from now? I feel that our implementation of the TA has basically all the major features that it needs to have. We could do better in some monitoring and status pages, and maybe some further knobs into lifetimes, but the system is basically stable. And what we plan to work on now is basically bring a lot more process and auditability into the system to provide more transparency for the community, and basically pay attention to what the ATFs comes up with to see what's next for us to implement. I don't see many larger features to be implemented. We just like 4 months ago, we deployed our RRDP, and tied with more process and more auditability, we plan to build out infrastructure, distribute publishing points. We already have 3 regions. We were publishing RRDP information, and we plan to extend that. And we are open and welcome more feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you. I see no questions at the moment. Let me turn to Willie. Willie, I know that you guys implement the deployment help desk. I don't know if you want to talk about this or something else, but the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Andrei. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so regarding Afrinic and regarding our infrastructure, I will start by saying that we start dealing with RPKI since 2006. And since 2017, I think the community starts seeing some improvement in our own infrastructure. Like for the Trust Anchor, for instance, we did some improvement on that sector. And yes, so now I think the most important the community have to understand is we are dealing with a migration of our infrastructure, basically what we call My Afrinic, which is not only just the website, but we also have a whole infrastructure behind My Afrinic. And we have current upgrades that we plan for by the end of the year. And hopefully with this upgrade, you will see more also feature regarding RPKI, because we want to align as much as possible all our infrastructure. But for the current version of our infrastructure, what we plan to add as a new feature or as an improvement, I would say, is, in our region, people are, before you start using RPKI, you need what we call a BPKI. And we want to get rid of that with a new feature that we call the 2-factor authentication that will be rolled out soon. And then after that, people will not need anymore to use BPKI. But I just want to say that for all the feature, especially on the enhancement and the API, and even for the GUI, most of them, people will start seeing them in the new, when we'll be rolling out the new My Afrinic infrastructure. That is basically what I want to say. And also, yes, at Afrinic, we have our help desk that we use with all the network operators when they want to, let's say, start in the field of creating ROA, they can contact us and we assist them. It can be either through the help desk or the ED button, like we have one soon. That's all, I think, unless people have some question.
Thank you, Willie. I don't see any questions now, but I think we are approaching the end of our discussion. I hope you found it interesting. If you want to say something, or if you have a question, there is still time. We have some time left, so you can raise your hand or post a question in the Q&A. Oh yeah, we have one question from Mark Alkins. I'm a newbie in RPKI. I have ISNs and prefixes. Just asked Afrinic how to proceed. I'm here to learn. It would seem like a good idea if all LIRs to have an API to allow for RPKI. This could encourage LIRs to go with the RPKI program. How can we encourage this? API and LIRs engagement. Can anyone provide a list of suggested things an LIR should do, and perhaps an algorithms for doing this? For example, as Let's Encrypt certificates only last 3 months, I fully automated the creation and renewing of these certificates for my web hosting customers, which is under their control. I think automation should be the goal for LIRs using RPKI, etc. So where do I find a cheat sheet as an Afrinic LIR? Willie, would you like to take this on?
Okay, for Afrinic at our site, what we do so far is like I said, we assist members through our help desk. And when one member contacts us regarding, let's say, RPKI, we have a document that we call a deployment playbook. It's a kind of cheat sheet where you can find some recommendation according to our infrastructure, how you can use ROA, how you can enable it, and what can be the best practice. But of course, with the new version, we'll be updating that document, and maybe you will also find something which is more publicly available.
Okay, well, we have no questions and no hands, and we are right on time. And we have a fun part at the end, and this is a quick poll that I will ask my colleagues Adrian or Aftab to do and introduce this poll, please.
Hi, everyone.
But before I do this, Adrian, let me thank very much all our panelists for interesting presentations. I hope you guys found it interesting and useful, and see you next time. Now the floor to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Andrei. Thanks, everyone. It will take really short time, but let me start a poll. We'll be giving out T-shirts. We'll be selecting, random winners, maybe 8 to 10. So here we go. Let's give you guys 40 seconds to do this. Do you see so everyone should be seeing the questions now. Okay, I see the answers are still coming in, but we'll have to end it. Let's give it, 5 more seconds. Let's give it one minute right? Okay, I'll have to end it here, guys. Press it. Okay. Let's see. For the first question, what is a ROA composed of? The answer that most have chosen is one or more. Let me show it, right? One or more IP ranges with max length. 93% has chosen this. The second question, which protocols are used by validators to fetch objects from an RPKI repository? rsync and RRDP, a big majority. Right, what we'll do is to pick random winners from this, and we'll be reaching out. Thanks again, guys. Back to you, Andrei, if you want to wrap it up. Yeah?
Well, thank you very much for your participation. We tried to cover the globe, and for some of you, it's really inconvenient. We apologize for that, but hopefully, again, you found it useful. And till tomorrow, thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Andrei.
Bye.
Recording
Thank you,
stopped.
Aftab.